Every country in the world has debt, but it's not as small as you might think. We're talking about trillions of dollars. The United States has $38 trillion in debt. The European Union has $14 trillion. Japan has $9 trillion. Even the countries that are rich in oil and seen as leaders of the global economy are in the same situation. At this point, it's impossible not to wonder, okay, but if everyone is in debt, who is all this debt actually owed to? And that's where things get a bit complicated, because the majority of this debt actually circulates within the world itself, but that doesn't mean everyone is affected in the same way. Today, the total global debt is around $315 trillion. That's almost 3 times the size of the world economy. So how did we get here? The origin of debt, war, missing gold, and a desperate king. The story goes back to the 1600s. England was at war with France, and when it ran out of gold in its treasury, it turned to merchants with a proposal. Give us money now and we'll pay you guaranteed interest from future taxes. This simple agreement is actually what gave birth to the modern bond we all know today. Soon after, the Bank of England was established, allowing governments to spend money they technically didn't have. In other words, debt has been like the breathing tube of governments for centuries. Other countries adopted and improved this system. Eventually, borrowing transformed from a sign of weakness into a sign of power. Whoever could borrow the most and at the lowest cost effectively ran the game. Fast forward to today, most of America's $38 trillion debt is actually owed to Americans. Banks, funds, insurance companies, even the Federal Reserve. Foreign countries hold only about 1/3. China's share isn't even 2% of the total. So the phrase America owes China sounds dramatic, but the real picture is much more intertwined. The same cycle exists elsewhere too. Japan buys US bonds. The US, through the IMF, lends money to Europe. Europe lends to developing countries. These developing countries use their reserves to reinvest back into developed countries. The world is basically living inside a giant loop of you lend me, I'll lend him, and he'll lend someone else. A global piggy bank where nobody really knows who owns the money. Everyone is both a debtor and a creditor. So who runs this system? This is where the spotlight turns to the markets. They decide whose debt is worth investing in, who should borrow cheaply, who should pay high interest. Hedge funds, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, central banks. If investors lose confidence in a country, its currency collapses, its economy falls apart, and even its government can fail. Democracy decides at the ballot box. The markets decide who stays standing. Governments don't borrow to pay off debt. Here's the surprising part. Governments don't borrow money to eliminate their debt. They borrow new money to roll over old debt. The system isn't designed for debt to end. It's designed so debt never ends. It may sound strange, but it makes sense in the financial world. Because government debt, especially US Treasury bonds, is the safest investment in the global economy. It's collateral for banks, a guarantee for funds and reserves for central banks. If the US suddenly said, "Oh, let's pay off all our debt," the global financial system would break. The world would lose its most reliable investment asset, money supply would shrink, and markets would freeze. Debt is like the heartbeat of the economy. If it stops, everything dies. But what if the balance breaks? When trust disappears, that's when the real faces show. Greece experienced this. When its debt became unsustainable, interest rates shot up, the economy collapsed, and severe austerity measures crushed the public. Argentina has gone through this cycle many times. Sri Lanka even ran out of fuel. When collapse begins, suddenly it becomes clear who actually holds the debt. The IMF rating agencies, big investors, other countries. When things are fine, nobody cares about debt. But once there is a crisis, it's shoved in our face. The missing part of we owe it to ourselves. Yes, most countries owe debt within their own economies, but the distribution inside society is far from equal. Interest income mostly goes to the wealthy. The burden of repayment often falls on ordinary taxpayers, so the bigger the debt gets, the bigger income inequality becomes. Conclusion. Today, debt is almost a necessity for the modern world. Governments run on debt, banks lend debt, investors buy and sell debt, and we live inside an economy quietly built on debt. Once, debt meant losing your freedom. Now, it's the most important piece keeping the system balanced. But if that balance breaks one day, we'll all be reminded of what debt really is, a promise that can't be kept forever. If this video gave you a new perspective, subscribe.